it's not your fault, that sometimes we get into these environments that we're born into. And unfortunately, it's the deck of the cards. But I tell you what, you're not hopeless. Welcome to Coach Soul, the podcast where we explore therapeutic ways to the best versions of ourselves. I'm your host, Steve Hudgins. I'm a licensed professional counselor dedicated to helping you navigate life's challenges. In each uplifting episode, we'll discuss mental health, relationships, self-care, emotional well-being, and personal growth. Join me and with my co-host, Kenya Evelyn, a therapeutic life coach, where sometimes we'll even welcome special guests to our show that share their experience and expertise. So let's embark on this transformative path together and discover a healthier and happier you. All right, welcome to Coach So. Kenya has a day off, and I have a wonderful guest today, Bonnie Brindle. And she's got a great website, a great book, and we'll get into that. Bonnie, if you don't mind, talk to our listeners a little bit about who you are and the reason why we're discussing anxiety.
Well, thanks, Dr. Steve. I am happy to be here with you. And we're here because you saw my, here's what I do. And you said, that might fit. And so I am Bonnie Brindle, and I'm known as the Anxiety Avenger. And how that became my moniker is that I used to suffer from debilitating panic disorder and agoraphobia, which literally traps people in their homes. And that started, this sort of panic and anxiety really started around for 12, 13 years old for me. And it grew and grew as I aged into graduating from high school and heading to college, because I never told anyone. It wasn't safe to talk to anyone in my family about those things. And, my friends knew I had edges, but they just supported me because they were my friends and still do. But I never told anybody. So it grew and grew. And when I got out of high school, I wasn't sure I was going to be able to get into college with my family situation, etc. But I did clawed my way in there to the college I most wanted to be at with the program I was really excited about, Equine studies and business. And anxiety lit up like a fire in me at college. So I ended up having to drop out after the first semester. And that, I would say, was my lowest point. From there.
It's interesting that you say that age, 13?
Yeah.
That just started, and agoraphobia and those type of things. I mean, did you have to push yourself to get into college with all this?
Oh, yes.
And then I guess it just triggered an avalanche of anxiety for you.
It did. And I think because it was such a big deal, I was finally where I wanted to be. I was finally going to get to go where I wanted to go. I knew I had the intellect. I knew I had the ambition. And I was finally going to be able to let aspects of my family life go and move on, that it was so important that it became almost overwhelming. Like I had to do everything right, and it just pushed my anxiety straight up and just lit it up like a fire. And pretty soon I couldn't go to class. I go to class, I'd go to the bathroom once or twice, then I'd go in, start in late, then I started leaving early. Then it was like death, as I put it in my book, death by 1,000 cuts, until I just, I couldn't do the class thing, and I knew I couldn't survive staying there, so I had to go back home, which was not what I wanted to do.
So to help our listeners to identify with anxiety, I do have a lot of clients that come in and they're suffering from anxiety, and some to your degree. And, oftentimes it could be food related. It could be, we talked off mic a little bit about transgenerational situations. And then you have gestation, mother and baby, and mothers passing it on. What was it for you in the family that just developed?
Oof, that's a big question. Let me see if I can pull that down a little bit. When I think of it, what I call the miserable generational inheritance, the crazy-making inheritance, I had a great-grandfather who was a World War I vet, came home to his family, right? A grandfather, World War II vet, came home to his family. He was an alcoholic. My mother married an alcoholic. So I've had that from both sides of the family. And my mother never, she took amazing physical care and worked really hard, but no emotional connection really at all. So, and then some of us are more sensitive to environmental stressors, I think, than others just naturally. I was always a really sensitive kid, really attached to nature, really focused on animals. I felt like I could see and hear and recognize things that other people didn't notice a lot. So with all of that history and all the family turmoil, a brother who was an addict, a brother who died, just, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, it just compounded.
Yeah, it compounded. And silence. Silence was a homegrown value of my family. So I never talked to anybody about what was going on with me. And then I thought
was it because of embarrassment, guilt, shame that you didn't want to talk to anybody?
I guess embarrassment. I felt like I would look around at other people my age, my peers, and think they're not thinking the things that I'm thinking. And I felt crazy when I started to get really anxious about things, or the panic disorder would make me feel like I'd be in the grocery store and I couldn't stand in line, or I go to a movie and I couldn't sit anywhere but the aisle, and then it became I couldn't sit anywhere but the back in the aisle. That other people weren't thinking these things, so I felt like at some moment I was going to go crazy and my brain would explode, and I didn't want to tell anybody. I felt so crazy. I really did. Yeah. And I know I'm not alone now when I look at my own clients. Like, yeah, I'm not the only person who went through this.
And that's one thing I want to let our listeners know is that it's easy to take blame that you did something to cause this. And listeners, please understand, it's not your fault that sometimes we get into these environments that we're born into. And unfortunately, it's the deck of the cards. But I tell you what, you're not hopeless. You do have support. It's learning how to do and what to do. Kenny will get on to me because, as I said, how we get stuck in the how. So it's what are some things that we can do. And that's what Bonnie and I are going to be discussing of two-part series here, because anxiety is such it's just a big book to go through. And 2 hour, just an hour broken down into two segments is just not enough. So Bonnie, here you are, you're going through college, you have to quit. Where was your anxiety then?
My anxiety then was at its peak. And I know a lot of folks who deal with anxiety often deal with depression as well. And I would say that overall, that has not been my experience.
Okay.
I have a level of resilience and a level of optimism that's kept me out of deep and certainly away from clinical depression. I've never been diagnosed as clinically depressed. But at that time, that was situational depression when I got back from college, back to the home I didn't want to be in, didn't have anywhere else to go, was really feeling stuck. And so I considered taking my life at that point. And so that's why I call that my lowest point. I really thought, like, what am I doing here? What is there for me here? I feel like I can't go out and do things, and my best friend is, living in New York, and I can't go visit her, and my other best friend asked me to be in her wedding, and I can't do that because I'm too anxious, blah, blah. And so I had
guilt set in because you weren't able to accommodate.
Oh, absolutely. Guilt and sadness about not being able to be there with my besties, for sure. And so I really thought about that. And I have a lifelong history with horses. And they were my very first therapists. When I started working with horses as a 10-year-old, I realized they were my first therapists. And I talked to them all the time, but I didn't talk to any humans. But when I thought about not knowing wherever I could be going next, there might not be horses, that was no. So I made the really good decision of picking up the phone and calling a therapist and taking that first step for myself. led to so much healing, so much learning, led to where I am now, helping other people. But that one phone call was everything.
Let me circle back around because you hit on a highlight, and I do want to encourage our listeners because equine therapy does exist. Here in Oklahoma, where I'm at in Tulsa, there are several around us that has equine therapy. And the reason why equine therapy works very well is that can you be so proud of me talking about frequency? Because horses have a high frequency, one of the highest in the animal kingdom. And we have the certain frequency. And so horses can read us. And that's why equine therapy works so well, that their frequency brings and elevates us up. There was a Jewish scientist that studied cotton and linen because the Bible, the menorah, whatever they call it, says you can't mix the two. And in her research, she found by mixing, it creates like a dead person's frequency. So polyester type clothing, those type of things lowers our frequency, which is also another way of having anxiety due to the polyester type fibers. So any kind of linen or cotton, something that's natural, helps elevate that frequency. So it's so good to hear that you were able to say horses, because I so believe in equine therapy. Nature, begins to work, and we'll talk about that in part 2. Here you are, you got a therapist. Sometimes people are afraid of a therapist because they're going to judge me or analyze me and things of that nature. And, some do not want to go to therapy because of that. But even in my own practice, I've noticed that some are standoffish, but a lot of them come to me and say, I've never met a therapist that's been non-judgmental like you before. And so when I talk to them, I say, you've had therapy. And they say, well, I wasn't ready to do the work. So where were you coming in? Here you are at the lowest point. You have horses as your friend. You go to a therapist. Were you at this point ready to do the work? And how did therapy work for you?
Oh, that's such a big question. And I want to circle back just for a second to
Sure.
Helping those of you who are listening to know that as complicated as all this sounds, anxiety is just blocked energy. That's it. Nothing else. It's blocked energy that we use to project a future possibility that 99% of the time doesn't come to fruition.
Kind of go a little deeper on that, Bonnie, what do you mean by blocked energy? Is it like a Hoover Dam that holds all this water that causes the energy to go through it? Kind of give it a description the best that you can so our listeners of all ages can have that understanding. What do you mean by blocked energy?
Absolutely. And I want to make sure we circle back to your previous question about how to shop for a therapist. But right now, blocked energy. Yes. Anxiety is just blocked energy. And when we can understand that our bodies are just an energetic being, we are giving off energy left, right, up, down all the time. We're bumping up against each other. The buzz is always there, right? And we have pathways through our bodies called meridians that our energy cycles and circles through our body constantly, and from top of the head to the tips of the toes, all the around the core of your body. And when those meridians, the energy in the meridians gets blocked from fear, anxiety, rage, frustration, any of the emotions that we hold on to and don't share, then it becomes part of who we are. And that grows. And that's how my anxiety grew, layer after layer after layer, until I could not really function anymore, right? So probably most people know what acupuncture is, using needles and that's actually going into the meridians and releasing energy. Ways that we can do that without needles are EFT tapping, which I use all the time to remove that blocked energy. Also, Jin Shin Jyutsu, which is a Japanese meridian practice that involves flows and holds through the body to redirect energy in a way that's very healing. And in the Western cultures in which many of us live, these things have been defined as, and I hate this word, but I know every single person listening knows what it means, defined as woo-woo. Oh, that's crazy stuff. That's right. Just woo. No, it's Eastern practitioners, thousands of years, medical practice to heal people. That's what it is, right? But because it doesn't involve a monetary system like ours, it doesn't involve drugs, we are told, oh, that's woo-woo, that'll never work. Well, I'm living proof that these things, in addition to wildlife imagery we'll get to later, and polyvagal theory, are very, very helpful. That I am entirely functional, a happy human being, and I'm not on any medications. And that, at one time I had to do that. But yeah, energy, it's constant flow, and it gets blocked when we're stressed and overwhelmed and angry and frustrated and fearful. And those things can be safely removed out of our minds and bodies.
So Bonnie, I mean, here we say the woo-woo helped you, but then you went to a therapist. Did the therapist do woo-woo, or did both, all of it? But kind of, we're circling back around again. And I just, I want our listeners to really be informed on this, because a lot of people think, oh, you can't cure anxiety. You got to have medication. I'm going to be on it for the rest of my life. And I'm like, no, you don't. Sometimes the medication we're taking is increasing anxiety. A lot of people will use CBD or THC. I'm sorry, but THC is the worst thing you can do. It highly goes into more higher anxiety, and it can also lead into more paranoia if you're not careful with what you're doing. So go ahead and kind of circle back for me.
Okay, so circle back to shopping for a therapist.
Yeah.
And how therapy and the Eastern practices and the wildlife imagery all came together. Okay. So first of all, I picked up the phone and I called the health plan that I had. I had no idea what therapist I might end up with. Something I've learned since then. I was fortunate. A lovely gentleman who was maybe only 6 or 7 years older than myself at the time was perfect for me. He was very laid back. I mean, picture the guy with his feet up on his desk, munching on a candy bar. Sorry, that's not a great thing, but at the time I was like, oh, this guy's okay. I had that clinical look of the guy with the clipboard and all that. I was going, ugh. He was not that. So, and he met me where I was. He really listened to what was happening. A very humanistic, which is what I use in my therapy, a very humanistic approach. I'd never felt judged. But I went there not being able to define my emotions. I couldn't tell you what they were. I just knew they were crazy. So he helped me recognize what anger was and where some of the roots of that, what I really was afraid of and what I was creating to make fear be bigger. And then he talked me into going from individual work with him to group therapy. And I thought, oh, no way am I going to sit in a group of people and start talking about my stuff. Are you kidding me?
Right.
Yeah, no way. But he got me to try it, and it was great. Sharing with other people who are dealing with some similar things was incredibly empowering. Years on years later, that led me to reading my book with a memoir that I didn't hold back, let me just say. Because I know so many other people are suffering similar things and saying nothing and feeling like, I wouldn't say that. They'd think I'm crazy. I'm the only one. No, you're not. You're definitely not. So, yeah, I did go to therapy, and it was very helpful. And these days I call talk therapy and medication the old playbook. They still work. It helped me. It got me started, right? And I did take a medication for a year and a half years ago. Took Lexapro for about 18 months. And then I knew, so when I started it, that wasn't going to be something I stayed on. I was not willing to stay on a medication for the rest of my life. And I know people who do that, and that's their choice, but it wasn't mine. But finding a therapist is like shopping. And it's awfully hard to go shopping when you're anxious and you're needing help. But it's like
it's like I tell people, therapists are like shoes. You got to try them on to find the right fit.
There you go.
You know, in my office, I have two gentlemen who rent office space, and I kind of chuckle because the very first office as you walk in is a therapist, and he's been in it for 40 years. And he comes with a nice jacket, bow tie, button down shirt, slacks, pristine looking gentleman. Good therapist. He works with narcissistic men, which most therapists don't, because that's the difficult. So he has a lot of patience and does really well with them. In between our offices is another gentleman who dresses business casual. And he's a very good therapist as well. And then you come to my office, and I'm just in jeans and a shirt like this today. And I'm chill. Maybe I need to put my feet on the desk and eat a candy bar to make it a little bit more interesting. So, ask questions of the therapist. I think it's very vital. I do that with every potential client that I screen. I let them know that I'm upfront. I'm not judgmental. And what I mean by that is you brought up a very good point earlier that I want to talk about communicating. Oftentimes I talk to my faith-based clients, and to get them to talk, I tell them it says in the book that confess your sins one to another. Now, for me, I don't like that. Not that I don't like the scripture. I'm saying I don't like the terminology of sin because it's a judgmental term by God. And what I tell them is I like to reuse Steve's version. Let's talk about our humanity. That way we're on the same playing field. We can't one up on each other because of sin. But it's so important that we're able to communicate, because when we don't, it goes back into that book of Psalms with David, which says, I laid waste in my bones. I ached, I moaned because I did not talk and say what I was feeling. Now that's Steve's version. Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, that's how I just look at it. And so we are trying to encourage you listeners that it is important to have that courage to find that therapist that you can feel comfortable with. It's unfortunate that I hear from my clients, well, I went to a therapist and all they did is talk about their grandchild. And I'm like, okay. They went to another therapist. They just sat there and went, and that was the end of the session. And so again, go shopping. You got to find the right shoe to fit for you. So good for you, Bonnie, that you were able to find a gentleman who just worked with that anxiety. And if you don't mind answering, how long did it take? Because oftentimes I hear that question, how long does it take for therapy? And I say, it's up to you and how you work it.
Yeah, and I'll say in different ways, it's daily ongoing for my life 43 years later. So, yeah, I worked with that therapist, and the talk piece was really important. The first time I told another human being what was happening with me, that was critically important. And then as I progressed in my own healing and moved into the work that I do, I recognized that it's limited, because a client can go in and talk with a therapist and walk out feeling very triggered by all the things they just discussed. Sure. And I mean, a good therapist will build closure around the discussion, but the energy that's behind all those feelings hasn't been accessed to release. So when I learned about EFT tapping at the therapeutic level, and I learned about Jin Shin Jyutsu, and I developed wildlife imagery as a modality for myself, and I started working with polyvagal theory to stimulate the ventral vagus nerve to calm the respiration and calm the heart rate, and do breath practices, and meditated with Sufis and whirled with dervishes. I mean, it's the list. And, today, this morning, right. I'm 63 years old. This morning, I did my daily Jin Shin practice, first thing I do in the morning, my daily gratitude, 3 gratitudes, got my hydration on, and got some exercise, whether that's just going out for a walk in the neighborhood or going to Pilates, to the gym. Like, those things happen every day. So that's my therapy right now.
Yeah.
It's never ending.
It's never ending because we've been imprinted, so to speak, as we're younger, and just conditioned to how we respond, whether it's a reactive nature. And that's where our culture is at today. We're so reactive that, we don't take the time to meditate and process and things like that nature. It's interesting what you say about most people. I teach at Rogers State University here, and I had class last night. We're practicing mock counseling sessions. And one of the things I taught them was you go in about 5 minutes, just kind of have some good rapport talk. You slowly dive in and you come back out. I call it my PBJ effect. It's a peanut butter jelly sandwich. So you have this positive going on, and just like peanut butter jelly, it's all the yucky stuff in the middle, and you just can't pull it apart. And you come out to the other side of the piece of bread, which is positive, that, here's some things. What did you take away today? To help them, to remind them what we discussed. I psychoeducate at the same time, because as I'm pulling out, I need to put back in. And that's just how my therapy works, so that they can go away feeling better. Now, I'm not, 100% effective with all clients. I do say probably about 90% of my clients can walk away feeling good about themselves when they walk out of there. Yeah, it's a lot of processing. But it is important to find that right therapist that has that right touch. And then I used to do EMDR therapy. Mm-hmm. That's what attracted me to you, Bonnie, is the fact that I kind of modified a little bit by using imagery with EMDR by creating wildlife. So I've done it to myself so much so that I can close my eyes and visually feel I'm walking in the woods. There's a cracked path I'm walking down, the crunch. I hear the birds, the squirrels, and all the nature going around me. And there's a babbling brook on the left side. And I'm walking with my dog in front of me. And it's a warm, sunny spring day. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. And I tell you what, if I can do that for 5-10 minutes and use a Navy SEAL breath box where you breathe in for 4, you hold for 4, you breathe out for 4, and you hold for 4, and you repeat the cycle. And that really helps. So guys, I really hate to do this and put on a cliffhanger, but you know what? That keeps you coming back. And we want more of Bonnie, because we're so interested into how does she come out on the other side. So until next time, take care.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on Coach Soul. As we wrap up, we want to remind our listeners of a few key points. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not substitute professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content shared here is based on professional opinion but may not apply to everyone's situation. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider before making changes to your mental health care. If you're in a crisis, please seek immediate professional help or contact a crisis hotline. Listening to this podcast does not create a therapist-client relationship. For personal advice, please consult with your licensed mental health professional in your area. Remember, your mental health journey is unique. While we hope this information is helpful, it is crucial to work directly with the qualified personnel for your specific needs. Thank you again for tuning in to Coach Soul, and we'll see you next time.